Good morning, class 3. I'm here to talk you through the poetry and just give you a few little pointers before you get started with yours. So I'm in the planning overview document and I need to scroll down until I get to task 1. Task 1, get poetic. So I've asked you if you'd like to have a go at writing a poem about your life in lockdown. So this can be in any form, doesn't have to rhyme. My poem, as you'll see in a minute, doesn't rhyme at all. But if you'd like your poem to rhyme, that's absolutely fine. Well, that rhymes. Wonderful. Okay, so let's go down and have a look at my poem. It's called My Life. You can call your poem whatever you like. Okay, the main thing to notice about my poem is that I've split it up into stanzas of 2 lines or 2 verses. Okay. One mistake that I didn't notice before I published this and sent it out to you is that I was missing a line between these 2 stanzas at the bottom. So between the 5th and the 6th stanza, I'm missing a line. Now, structure in your poem is quite important. So in this case, I've chosen to do 2 lines, 2 lines, 2 lines. So how your poem looks on a page is also kind of important, but it also determines where you pause and what your poem will sound like at the end. Okay. Now, the other thing to notice is my use of repetition. Repetition is my main sort of feature in this poem, I would say. So I've chosen to start my poem the same way on every first line of the stanza. So my life is, and then I use a comparative, so it's either quieter, lonelier, smaller, simpler, closer, fuller. Okay, comparing one thing to another than it was before. So than it was, than it was, than it was. Okay, now that structure will help me when I come to read my poem. So let's have a go at that now. My life is quieter than it was. No voyages afar or days spent bustling about. My life is lonelier than it was. No sleepovers or friends to tea. My life is smaller than it was. No wide open spaces, just these 4 walls. But my life is simpler than it was. Less rushing here or hurrying there. My family is closer than it was. More time together, playing games and building forts. My life is fuller than it was, full of peace, full of hope. Okay, so apart from the repetition, there's a few things to note about the way that I chose to recite or perform my poem. Okay, I chose to go slowly on the first line and then quickly on the second line. And then the same again, slowly on the first line and quickly on the second line. And I also chose to pause between each part. The other thing that you might have noticed, if I've done it right, was the first part of the poem, I was sounding a bit more glum. And that's because I've split my poem up into 2 halves. The first half of my poem is the negatives, the things that aren't so good about being in lockdown. And in the second half of my poem, I'm trying to find all the positives, the good things about having to stay at home. So when I recited my poem, I tried to sound a bit sadder in the first part. Oh, my life is smaller than it was. No wide open spaces, just these 4 walls. But my life is simpler than it was. Less rushing here or hurrying there. So you could do that with your poem too. Try to think about how you're feeling for each line and try and put some emphasis also on the important words. So I try to emphasize the comparatives. So quieter, lonelier, smaller, simpler, closer, and fuller. So I'm going to have another go at reading my poem. Hopefully I'll do it even better this time, with the aid of this being red and this being green to remind me that these are sort of negative thoughts and these are more positive ones. And I've highlighted these to tell me to emphasize those. I've also put but in capital letters to remind me that it's a really important but, and that I need to pause and put real emphasis on that too. Okay, so you can do the same with your poem when you come to write it. You can absolutely put it in different colours to help you, or try to put things in bold or capital letters for really important words. That's absolutely fine. And remember, you don't have to write in full sentences either. Okay, here we go. My life. My life is quieter than it was. No voyages afar or days spent bustling about. My life is lonelier than it was. No sleepovers or friends to tea. My life is smaller than it was. No wide open spaces, just these four walls. But my life is simpler than it was. Less rushing here or hurrying there. My family is closer than it was. More time together, playing games and building forts. My life is fuller than it was. Full of peace, full of hope. Okay, so that completes my poetry. I really look forward to reading and hearing yours later in the week. That's all for now.